I don't know if you're aware or not, but spooky season is only 3.5 months away, which means it's the perfect opportunity to talk about another batch of creepy unsolved mysteries from the grimdark future of Warhammer 40K. From a bizarre species of formless, mind-controlling alien parasites that infiltrate our societies in order to hide from something far more horrifying, an ancient unseen evil that has been hunting them across the galaxy for thousands of years and is on a collision course with mankind, an ominous pattern of dead worlds within the Jericho's Reach sector that doesn't make any sense and seems out of place in the galactic alignment. It's as if something ancient and incredibly powerful has dragged them through space and time to this precise location for unknown reasons. Many members of the Inquisition are afraid that if the mystery surrounding these worlds isn't solved soon, they could usher in a calamity that mankind isn't ready for. We're also going to be talking about one of the most impossible places in existence, the Crystal Labyrinth of Tzeentch, and the only person in history that was ever able to conquer it, an unknown little girl and her little black dog. We're going to be talking about all that and a whole lot more in this video, but before we dive headfirst into the grimdark, a quick shout out to this video's sponsor. This video is sponsored by Asphalt Legends Unite, an amazing new free-to-play arcade racing game available on just about everything you can think of. We're talking PS5, PS4, Xbox, Steam, Android, iOS, PC, and coming soon to Nintendo Switch. The game is absolutely jam-packed with action, jumps, spins, and 3 distinct levels of nitro. There are over 250 hypercars to unlock and a fancy new garage to show off your collection in. My absolute favorite part about this game is its collision mechanics. It is unbelievably satisfying to 360 into another car, cause them to explode, and then immediately peel out into a sick jump. And not to mention, you can play multiplayer with your friends in a new co-op mode, no matter their platform of choice, thanks to true crossplay. With this entry, the series got a huge graphical overhaul, like a killer new state-of-the-art lighting system that makes all of the environments and cars look absolutely amazing. Asphalt Legends Unite just launched on July 17th, so now is the absolute perfect time to start playing. Click on my link in the description of this video or scan my QR code here on the screen to download the game for free today and get a ton of special rewards. Big thanks to Asphalt Legends Unite for sponsoring this video. Number 5. What are the cryptos running from? The grimdark future of Warhammer 40K is chock full of strange and sinister alien species, some being far more documented than others due to the Imperium's numerous encounters with them. However, some of the creepiest aliens are the ones that we still know very little about, and none capture the fear of the unknown quite as well as the cryptos. They are insanely rare, and documented encounters with them are often inconsistent to say the least. What we do know about them is that they don't actually have a physical body, nor, as far as the Inquisition's been able to determine, a home planet. Their true form is something of a sentient gas cloud, said to be hued by flickering green light and made up of half-formed horrors that could drive a man to madness if he stared into them for too long. These guys have evolved to live unaided within the cold vacuum of space, drifting in the dark places between stars, ever searching for far-flung human colonies to feed on. It is believed that the cryptos primarily target human settlements with little to no Imperial oversight, where the risk of discovery is greatly reduced. When such a community is located, they will drift down to the planet's surface in search of a human host to infect. This occurs when the victim unknowingly inhales their gaseous body. Now, once inside of the host, they will immediately dominate their mind, leaving the victim locked in and unable to control their body. The crypto will then immediately learn everything that their host does and will be able to mimic their behavior and mannerisms so completely that even lifelong friends or family members won't be able to tell that something is off. Once this process is complete, they will take their place within society, slowly draining the life force from their victim like a malevolent parasite, all while exerting a psychic aura of suggestion on every living creature within a sizable radius. Now, over time, they will manipulate this community, molding it to their design in order to better suit their purposes. When their stolen body is near death, they will find a discreet place to suck the last dregs of life out of them before discarding the withered husk and taking a new host. The cryptos are incredibly patient predators and never eat more than is needed to sustain themselves. They can go on living like this completely undetected for years or even decades, only abandoning their hunting grounds when one of two things occurs. One, they are discovered by a sizable force that the community they are influencing will be unable to fight off. Or 2. For reasons unknown to the Inquisition, they sometimes will suddenly enter a panic state and do everything they can to get away, not just from this colony, but the planet as a whole, retreating back into the void of space as if fleeing from an unseen threat known only to them. Now, I'll freely admit, mind-controlling aliens that infiltrate human societies are not exactly out of place in the grimdark future. Hell, for the people living within the Imperium, it's just another Tuesday. But whereas these guys share a lot in common with, say, gene-stealer cults or the followers of the ruinous powers, the differences are pretty stark and alarming. For one, they don't seem to have some hidden agenda. They're focused purely on survival, and everything that they do is made to conceal their presence even further. They don't demand to be worshipped by a lesser species, and thus there are no shrines or cathedrals built in their honor. They're not attempting to grow their flock, thus the communities they infect will almost always remain small and insular. And finally, as far as the Inquisition can tell, they're not the heralds of a future calamity. And most of the time with gene-stealer cults, they'll attempt to grow as large as possible before eventually trying to take over the planet and ushering in a Tyranid invasion. The same goes for the cults of chaos, who will often attempt to grow unseen in order to eventually conduct a blasphemous ritual and open a warp gate to a demonic incursion. The cryptos, on the other hand, don't do any of this. They only care about hiding, and that's where things get really interesting and really creepy. Infected hosts that have been captured by the Inquisition and have undergone psycho-psychic analysis to evaluate their thought patterns have revealed a couple of interesting things. First and foremost, the cryptos hate humanity. They view us with utter contempt and refer to us only as meat. But conversely, they also view us as their only chance at salvation. Second, they do not experience emotion like we do. In fact, to simplify things, it's as if they don't experience emotion at all. That is with one massive exception. The Inquisition has derived the telltale markers of fear in their thought patterns. Fear defines everything that they do, and they're afraid all of the time. However, it's not the Inquisition or the forces of mankind that they're afraid of, but something else. Although there's still a lot of pieces missing to this puzzle, what the Inquisition has been able to determine is that the cryptos are running from something ancient and predatory. An invisible enemy that so far has remained completely undetected by even the most sensitive of mankind's augur equipment. Whatever this thing is, whenever it gets close to the cryptos, they lose all sense of rationality and are gripped by a primal sense of panic that will see them abandon communities that they have existed in for years, desperate to get away, fleeing into the void wherein a stable food source is never guaranteed. The few times this has been observed, the Inquisition is always left completely baffled, as no threat could be detected. It's still just a theory, but there are some within the Ordos that believe that cryptos did not always exist as they do now, that their bodiless form was artificially induced evolution, either inflicted upon their species as a last-ditch effort to escape whatever is hunting them, or a curse induced by the very same threat. Something that's only ambition is to hunt down every last one of them and right its previous failure to confine them to the halls of extinction. How long the cryptos have been preying upon humanity, how many of our societies they've successfully infiltrated, or what the source of their fear ultimately is something that the Inquisition has taken very seriously, labeling the cryptos as a Diabolus-level threat to mankind. We may never learn what exactly it is that they're running from, but perhaps for the sake of humanity, some terrible truths are better left unlearned. Number 4. The little girl who conquered Tzeentch's maze. This next one is one of Warhammer 40K's most classic and iconic mysteries that people have been debating back and forth ever since we first were introduced to it back in 2008 in the 5th edition Chaos Demon Codex. For those unfamiliar with the nature of chaos, the realms of each of the 4 chaos gods are molded to their image. At least we believe that they are. Things in the warp get weird, and we're dealing with matters of the metaphysical. So when its locations are described to us, they're described in terms that we can understand, as in physical locations made of tangible substance. But I'm getting sidetracked. That's a topic for a different video. The realm of Tzeentch, the chaos god of trickery, lies, and magic, takes the form of a massive crystal labyrinth that stretches across his entire domain. At the heart of the maze is Tzeentch's impossible fortress that contains his hidden library, a collection of every single scrap of knowledge, every thought, idea, and belief of every living creature across space and time. Now obviously, gaining access to such a place is the dream of many of his followers, dark sorcerers, and all kinds of seekers of forbidden knowledge. But to get there, one would need to conquer the Crystal Labyrinth, which is in of itself an impossible task. Out of the infinite possible routes a person could take, there is said to be only a single true path through the maze that leads to its heart, a road that passes through 9 gates, each taking the form of a golden arch that is 3 times the height of a man and bathed in purple, blue, and pink flames. To pass through each of these gates, one must converse with the labyrinth's guardian who watches over all of them. When approached, he will pose the seeker a question in the form of one of the 999 riddles of Zaratha. Each of these riddles is said to be so impossible, so taxing, that only the greatest lateral and logical thinkers could discern their answer. If you get the question wrong, the Guardian will immediately swallow you whole. In the history of time and space, there has only ever been one individual that made it all the way through the maze, a person that was said to have concealed their true form under the guise of a young girl who was accompanied by a little black dog. Now apparently, Tzeentch was so outraged that somebody managed to complete the maze that he confronted the Guardian, who immediately accused the girl of cheating. But who was this person? Was it actually just a little girl and the whole bit about them concealing their identity was something that Tzeentch made up to balm his bruised ego? Or was it somebody that we've met in 40K? Whoever it was must have had the intelligence of a deity, as it's probably impossible for a mere mortal to best Tzeentch. Some theories have speculated that it was the Harlequin laughing god Chegarak in disguise, whereas others have pointed out that it could have been the Emperor of Mankind. However, it's also possible that the labyrinth itself was meant to be some type of testing ground, wherein Tzeentch's subordinates would have to prove themselves. Maybe it was simply a powerful demon prince of Tzeentch who succeeded where many others had failed in the past. Now, I should point out the elephant in the room, as a lot of people will point to this and be rather dismissive, claiming that it's simply a reference to the Wizard of Oz, which is definitely true, but just because it's a reference to Dorothy doesn't mean that it's not canon. This appeared in official Games Workshop source material, so it definitely happened. This franchise is absolutely chock full of referential material to other franchises. A lot of people like to claim that 40K stole most of its story from Dune, and just because something is a reference doesn't mean that we should dismiss it. So who do you think this little girl was, and how do you think she managed to conquer the maze? Like I said before, it's one of those classic 40K mysteries, so I can't wait to read all of your theories down in the comment section below. The crazier, the better. Number 3. The Dark Pattern. The haunted expanse of Jericho's Reach is no stranger to unsolved mysteries. Yet there is one that stands apart from the rest that has continued to vex mankind ever since the sector was first discovered thousands of years ago. You see, within this place exists a plethora of barren dead planets. There's no obvious evidence on their surface to what happened to them, and the vast majority seem out of place in the galactic alignment, as if they're not native to the sector and were brought here from somewhere else. Now, dead planets are nothing new in the grimdark future. The galaxy is a dangerous place, and over millions of years, any number of apocalyptic scenarios or celestial phenomena could occur that would leave a planet scoured of life. But there's something off about the ones in Jericho's Reach. First and foremost, the sheer abundance of them dwarfs every other blighted sector encountered by mankind. And second, their alignment seems to form a dark sigil, a pattern of unknown significance that bears the telltale markers of intelligent design. This dark pattern, as the Inquisition has taken to calling it, is said to be a web of death, formed from thousands of dead worlds torn from their celestial procession by an unknown force. It is the belief of the Death Watch, multiple ordos of the Inquisition, and the Dead Cabal that if the dark pattern's secrets are not unearthed and its mystery left unsolved, it very well may herald in a future calamity the likes of which humanity is not prepared for. There have been countless attempts to identify the dark pattern's creators, yet all remain inconclusive. Now, some believe that it was made by the followers of the Ruinous Powers, whereas others have implicated the Eldari or the Necrons. Others still claim that its architect may be something or someone that humanity has either not yet encountered or exists beyond the realm of human comprehension. As I mentioned before, the Imperium has been aware of the dark pattern for quite some time. In fact, it was the first thing of note documented by the early explorator fleets of the Adeptus Mechanicus when they encountered the region thousands of years ago. is something that immediately raised red flags and caught the attention of the Inquisition. The Ordos launched multiple investigations into them, but could never really find anything substantial. There were many in those early years that felt as strange as the dark pattern seemed. Its origin was most likely natural, and due to millennia of no activity, it wasn't worth the continued expenditure of resources needed to study it. However, not all were so quick to dismiss it. Inquisitor Gerald Sinclair claimed that when he set foot on one of these planets, he could feel the lingering touch of something ancient and intelligent. Every fiber of his being was screaming that the dark pattern held enormous significance. Although the rest of the Inquisition would eventually cease their operations, Sinclair continued on alone, aided only by his entourage and a magos of the Adeptus Mechanicus. His expedition between all of the planets lasted about 10 years without any meaningful discovery. That was until he came to the world of Nunk, where his worst fears would end up being confirmed. When he and his team went down to investigate, their planet-side deep scans picked up both slow geothermal changes taking place and an enormous amount of tectonic activity. There was something going on deep beneath the surface. As the investigation progressed, they eventually came across an ancient set of ruins that bore no marker of known xenos lifeforms and had no obvious entrance. The ruins made Sinclair feel uneasy, and his instincts told him to leave them alone and return when he had more support from the Ordos. However, the magos that was accompanying him was high on the promise of discovery and refused to leave. He had his team of tech priests and servitors install blasting charges that ripped a hole into the side of the ruins, creating an opening for their team to continue exploring. We, unfortunately, have no idea what Sinclair and his team encountered within the ruins, as this is where all of his transcripts end. No member of his team was ever seen again. Sinclair's ship was found adrift in the Iriok system, many light years away from Nunk. When his vessel was boarded by the Imperial Navy, they found it completely empty of crew. The Inquisitor alone was seated in the command chair, staring blankly into space, his body withered and suffering the ill effects of extreme dehydration and starvation. He turned his head to the rescue team, smiled, and then lost consciousness. Now, thankfully, Sinclair would eventually make a full recovery, though he had no memory of the time on Nunk and what he encountered in the ruins. But that didn't matter. Something was going on. He had gotten close to the truth, and someone or something had cast him out. He gathered together every scrap of data that he had from his 10-year expedition and immediately went to his peers within the Inquisition, assuming that they would agree with his assessment that the dark pattern was dangerous and needed to be investigated further. He proposed to them the creation of the Dead Cabal, a task force made of members of the Death Watch and the Inquisition whose sole purpose would be to study the dark pattern. His peers in the Inquisition, however, didn't end up agreeing with him. Some of them called him mad, while other more generous individuals claimed that he had clearly suffered a traumatic event that was skewing his judgment. They took one look at his reports and claimed they were lacking substance, and thus his request was denied. This left Sinclair dumbfounded and outraged, but before he could protest, an unknown woman, who none in attendance had ever seen before and was bearing the sigil of Ordo Xenos of the Inquisition, came to his defense. She told the council that they needed to heed his advice and supported the creation of the Dead Cabal. The Inquisitors and Death Watch commanders that were in attendance moved to apprehend the unknown speaker, but before they could get a hold of her, she suddenly vanished in a flash of emerald light, leaving behind only a tome bearing the sigil of the Holy Ordos and embedded with a crystal hourglass. The book was immediately taken to the Chamber of Vigilance for further study, though try as hard as they might, they could never get it to open. To this day, none have seen any of the contents within, and many believe that the book will only open to reveal its secrets in humanity's time of need. Although no formal investigation was sanctioned after Sinclair's appeal, the Dead Cabal would eventually be formed, and new watch stations were constructed throughout Jericho's reach to aid in the investigation. The Death Watch settled in for their long vigil, and many millennia would end up passing. Now, despite the Death Watch's efforts, no meaningful breakthroughs were ever made, and when the Age of Shadows began, most of these new stations would end up abandoned, as there were far more pressing concerns at the time. It has only been within the last few centuries that the Death Watch has taken renewed interest in the dark pattern, and the old stations, now having gone unoccupied for millennia, have been brought back into service. But what exactly is going on here? What is the dark pattern? who created it and for what purpose. Although we don't have a lot of concrete answers, there have been hundreds of theories that have been put forth over the years. So let's talk about the 4 most prominent ones. The first theory, and the one that has gained the most traction, is that all of the worlds within the Dark Pattern are part of an ancient Necron empire that has yet to awaken. Considering over recent years, the Necrons have continued to have an ever-increasing presence within Jericho's reach, this theory holds a lot of weight. But based on what the Imperium knows about the Necron dynasties, it would be impossible for each of these planets to be a tomb world, harboring millions of sleeping Necrons. If that was the case, it would be the largest dynasty ever encountered. Because of this, they might not all actually be tomb worlds. If the Necrons really are responsible for the Dark Pattern, it may be some type of massive energy nexus that, when activated, will cause the unknown dynasty to awaken once again. The second, more hopeful theory, that is supported by the research of prognosticator Renan Terrell, is that the Dark Pattern was originally created by the Eldari as a precursor to the Webway. We can't even fathom how the Webway was originally created, and it's very possible that these planets were used as something of a testing ground in its earliest stages of development. Although the theory seems far-fetched, Triel has claimed to have recently found traces of long-dead xenos devices on these worlds that he believes has the ability to access the Webway. If the theory proves to be correct, and the Dark Pattern can be used to access the Webway, it would be invaluable in mankind's fight against the Eldar. The third theory, put forth by an Iron Hands tech marine, Zirel of the Dead Cabal, states that the Dark Pattern was originally created by the Old Ones, an ancient species that propagated life throughout the Milky Way, and famously created both the Orcs and the Eldar and fought against the Necrons during the War in Heaven 60 million years ago. He postulates that each of these planets was actually a massive genetic laboratory, all linked together through unknown techno-arcane means, where sentient species great and small were engineered by the Old Ones to aid them in their conquest of the stars. But when their empire began to crumble all around them, all of the worlds were scoured of all traces of technology and life in order to safeguard their last remaining strongholds. Others have stated that this theory is pretty out there and it's lacking any substantial evidence. To the Imperium's knowledge, which admittedly is very limited when it comes to the Old Ones, they were never active in this part of the galaxy. But Zirel is insistent and continues to search for evidence of the Old Ones' involvement. The final theory comes from Watch Captain Matthias, who claims that the Dark Pattern is directly tied to the Ruinous Powers, and when activated, will lead to an expansion of the Hadex anomaly, plunging countless planets into chaos, darkness, and despair. Check out one of my earlier entries in the Grimdark Mystery series if you want to know all about that particular crazy warp phenomena. Now, seeing as how the Dark Pattern was mostly a prominent storyline in the now-defunct Deathwatch RPG by Fantasy Flight Games, it's unknown if Games Workshop will ever pick this storyline back up. I for one hope that they do, because they left us on a massive cliffhanger. Until then, however, the Dark Pattern remains one of 40K's creepiest unsolved mysteries. Number 2. The Space Marine chapter that doesn't exist. Now, the next mystery I want to talk about is a little bit different from the other ones that we've covered in this series so far. It's a little less creepy and more just super interesting, and can trace its origins back to real-life events, and namely a particular Games Day and Golden Demon event back in 2005. Now, this is all centered around the Steel Confessors chapter of Space Marines, who were said to be a successor of the Iron Hands. But unlike the Iron Hands themselves, or quite literally any other chapter of Space Marines for that matter, they were not created by the Imperium. Instead, they were made in secret by the Adeptus Mechanicus. It is believed that they were the Mechanicus' attempt at having a Space Marine chapter of their own that was loyal to them first and foremost, even above the Emperor himself. The project was ultimately successful, and in the 36th millennium, the Steel Confessors were born, after the Skitarii forces of the Mechanicus assisted the Iron Hands in retaking the Boris system. In honor of their assistance, the Iron Hands Council of Iron agreed to the Mechanicus' proposed experiment, and provided them a portion of their gene seed in order to create the new successor chapter. The creation of the Steel Confessors was not exactly advertised, nor was it authorized by the High Lords of Terra, and once Ordo Hereticus caught wind of this, they immediately petitioned for the destruction of the chapter. This was seen as the Mechanicus trying to directly undermine the Imperium's authority. and if not met with immediate censure, would lead to an arms race between the two allied factions. After careful review, however, the High Lords ultimately decided that it would be a waste to destroy them, so they allowed the Steel Confessors to continue to exist so long as they swore loyalty to the Imperium and the Emperor over the Mechanicus and agreed to closely follow the tenets of the Codex Astartes. All of the conditions were met, and to this day, the Steel Confessors prove to be a valuable asset in mankind's fight against the alien, the heretic, and the mutant. Now that being said, old habits tend to die hard, and deeply ingrained beliefs are almost impossible to truly rewrite. All members of the chapter are strict adherents to the faith of the machine cult, and worship the divine trinity of the Omnissiah, the machine god, and the motive force. Although it's not directly stated, if civil war ever broke out between the Mechanicus and the Imperium, the secret dual loyalty of the chapter would have predictable consequences, faith and duty coming into direct conflict with one another. There is a high likelihood that they would ultimately side with their honored tech brothers and sisters within the machine cult. So all of this is pretty interesting, right? A Mechanicus chapter of the Space Marines? Well, unfortunately, nobody knows if any of this is true or not, and anybody who has access to evidence supporting their lore has yet to come forward in 2 decades. You see, the bulk of the Steel Confessors lore can be traced back to a leaflet titled Index Astartes Steel Confessors that was supposedly handed out at a Games Day and Golden Demon event at the NEC in Birmingham, England in 2005. The event featured a massive multiplayer battle known as the Battle of Kalevala, in which narratively these Steel Confessors were said to play a major role. Games Workshop even made a full life-size statue of one of their Space Marines and a bust of one of their Terminators for the event, of which pictures have been circulating on the internet now for quite some time. However, as of the time of this recording, no physical copy of Index Astartes Steel Confessors has ever been found. There are no pictures of it, no scans, and it's never been reprinted by Games Workshop. Aside from the people that actually attended this event, the only reason that any of us know anything about the Steel Confessors is from a now deactivated Angelfire account, wherein the page's author created an article claiming to be a direct copy of all of the information contained within the leaflet. But unfortunately, said author failed to provide any pictures of the document in question, so we have no way of verifying if any of it's actually true. Maybe they were being truthful, maybe they copied the leaflet word for word, or maybe this was simply a hoax, the author using an interesting mystery to push their own fan canon as real lore. Since that event, the Steel Confessors have not shown up in any meaningful way in any 40K story, be that a campaign for the tabletop game or one of the novels. The only actual mention that I've personally seen of them is that the main character of the Nightlord trilogy, Talos, at one point had replaced a damaged thigh guard on his power armor with one that was supposedly taken from a slain Steel Confessor. That's pretty much it. Despite the lack of concrete information, or perhaps because of just how intriguing the mystery surrounding the chapter is, the Steel Confessors have, over time, developed a small but passionate and loyal fan base. This is one of those mysteries that we'll unfortunately never get an answer to unless Games Workshop decides to reprint the leaflet, as it's pretty easy to fake something like that nowadays, and even if a real one did show up, it would be seen with a lot of scrutiny. Because of this, the lore of the Steel Confessors remains one of 40K's most interesting mysteries. Number 1. What is lurking in the Black Reef? The Black Reef is one of the most bizarre and dangerous areas of space in existence, and by many accounts, it's easier to explain what it isn't over what it is. The Black Reef has been described as a briar patch of gravitational madness that stretches for a dozen light years. The forces at work within the reef are so powerful that not only do they have a profoundly destructive effect on the physical universe, but somehow the reef itself is able to reach into the warp, tear ships out of the immaterium, and then subject them to its incomprehensible power. Inside of this place, gravity is no longer defined by the laws of nature. It pushes, pulls, wrenches, and tears seemingly at random, with a strength great enough to grab planets and fling them across the void. Such powerful gravitational ripples could rip a ship apart in mere moments. Even if somebody was able to find a path through its madness, the energy coursing through the reef creates a powerful magnetic effect on all physical matter. Wrecks of ancient ships, asteroids, and even rogue planets caught within its tides will rapidly change course and accelerate towards each other. Or, for that matter, any Imperial ship unlucky enough to find themselves trapped within the reef's currents. Although numerous voyages have been launched in an attempt to penetrate the reef and find out what's going on inside, almost all of them have ended in unprecedented disaster. To add to the Imperium's lack of information, the very few individuals that have gone in and made it back out alive have given conflicting reports on what they encountered. If any pattern can be derived from the mad scribblings of these intrepid explorers, however, it's that they all agree there's something hidden deep within the reef's core, something big and powerful. To date, the Imperium has no idea if the reef is a natural phenomena, something born of the warp, forbidden science run amok, or something else entirely. Even something like the Hadix anomaly or the Eye of Terror, for as strange and unnatural as they may be, can at least be explained through the Imperium's understanding of the warp. The Black Reef, on the other hand, defies all attempt at rational explanation. Debate over what it is or isn't has raged so fiercely within the Adeptus Mechanicus that many warn a schism is imminent, at least within the tech priests of the Achilles Crusade. Their more puritanical members state that all attempts at studying this thing need to be shut down immediately, whereas the more radically minded tech priests declare that the reef contains secrets that mankind must possess. Otherwise, the Tau, who have been using the reef as a natural barrier between themselves and the Imperium, and have also taken to studying it, might gain said knowledge first, and use it to create a weapon that could harness the power of the reef and be used against humanity. Although accounts of what is going on inside of the reef are rare, the most credible one comes from a rogue trader named Talus Kai. If his testimony is to be believed, then at the center of the reef exists a massive black sphere the size of a star that orbits a system of lost worlds, all pulled from different parts of the galaxy. Further, he claims this region was guarded by an undocumented reptilian xenos species that he called the Cyrishine. Their entire purpose was to guard the area against an ancient enemy that was prophesied to one day return and enslave them. After he submitted his report and the cult Mechanicus got a hold of it, a whole bunch of new theories started popping up. Some of the tech priests claimed that the sphere must be a star-sized collection of pure antimatter, which the value of such a thing couldn't even begin to be quantified. Others said the sphere might be alive, an unknown xenos lifeform containing godlike psychic abilities. Many others claimed the orb couldn't be natural, and might in fact be a singularity engine, a machine powerful enough to move the stars themselves. But if this is true, then who built this thing and why? What purpose did it originally serve, and who are the Cyrishine protecting it from? There's still a lot of unknowns when it comes to the Black Reef, and we likely won't know the truth until either the Tau or the Imperium manage to launch another successful expedition inside. Until then, the Black Reef remains one of 40K's creepiest unsolved mysteries. And that was 5 more grimdark mysteries from Warhammer 40K. Which one was your favorite and why? What do you think is lurking at the center of the Black Reef? What do you think the cryptos are running from? And who was the person that conquered Tzeentch's maze? Was it actually the Emperor or was it somebody else? Do you know of any other creepy unsolved mysteries from 40K that you'd love to hear me talk about? Let me know all of your thoughts down in the comment section below. And don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I wouldn't want you to miss out on the next batch of grimdark mysteries. As always, big thanks to everyone who supports the work that I do, and I will catch you all in the next one.